So we are back to the study of the book Between Heaven and Earth, and I just want to go back a little bit because this is going to be important in this chapter on the who is who on this chapter. What we study on chapter 18, which is the reminiscences of Amaro. So we have Esteves, Julio, and Armando, three inseparable friends. This is in the 19th century, at the time of the war on Paraguay, that Brazil fought with Paraguay in by the end of the 19th century. So Esteves gets married to Lina Flores, and Julio and Armando develop deep affection for Lina Flores. Lina, disregarding Esteves, joins Julio and later rejects him for Armando, causing the anguish that led Julio to suicide. Armando, remorseful for causing his friend's death, becomes disenchanted with Lina, abandoning her in turn. Lina dies 2 days after being run over, struck by the carriage in which Armando and his wife were traveling. Upon returning to the spiritual world, Armando finds her united with Julio in distressing conditions, committing himself to assist them. Armando is Amaro now. Esteves is Mario Silva, the nurse, and Julio is Julio again, the child. Lina Flores is Zulmira now, okay? So last month, we studied chapters 30 and 31. On chapter 30, following the reincarnation process of Julio, Clarencio is called to assist Zulmira with organic problems in her pregnancy. Mutual influences between the reincarnating soul and the pregnant woman due to mental symbiosis between them, and this is also one of the causes of birthmarks. And also we learn about the origin of the behavior changes that can occur in a woman during pregnancy, and why some pregnant women develop sudden aversion to their husbands because of the child that may be an enemy of the husband. What happens to the woman during pregnancy when the reincarnating spirit is an adversary from her past, or when the spirit is more closely connected to the father, which is the other way around. And new organic changes that appear in Zulmira during the pregnancy, and Clarencio explained the causes of the changes that she goes through, related to the symbiosis between the new reincarnating spirit and the mother, the mental symbiosis. And then she gives birth by the end of chapter 30, and the boy was again named Julio. On chapter 31, we find Julio completing 1 year of new existence. He contracts a severe throat infection, an area where he had congenital deficiency, which we know it's caused by his first attempted suicide when he ingested a poison. He was saved then, but he threw himself in the river and succeeded in committing suicide. So he dies drowning in the sea in the beginning of the book, and now he comes back again with a severe throat infection, which is a consequence of the poison he ingested. And then we have this fortuitous surprise, nothing is coincidence, but then we have Mario Silva, that we know is Esteves, a nurse of the pediatrician, called to attend to the sick Julio, was found chatting with Antonina, who was also part of the past as Lola, right? Lola Ibarruri, which was also involved in the past of these individuals, was first involved with Mario Esteves. And Mario, very happy, accompanies Antonina to her home and is invited to participate in the family gospel study session. And the theme they study, reconciliation with adversaries, which will be very important in this next chapter. Through the indirect action of Clarencio, Mario Silva is then conveniently prepared to face the problem of his spontaneous antipathy towards Amaro's family. So, looking at the participants in this story, it's important here that we look at Julio. That is again Julio. He was in the past Julio. Amaro, that was Armando in the past. Involved with Lina, who is Zulmira nowadays. Also Mario Esteves. Mario was and Zulmira were involved, and she left him to marry Amaro in the present incarnation. Mario Esteves in the past, also involved with Lina, and Amaro as Armando, responsible for the death of Lina. He was involved with Lina, but he left her when Julio committed suicide, and she got very distressed, went downhill from there, eventually was killed by Armando with his carriage when run over. And then we have Evelina, that is the older daughter of Amaro and Odila, who now is the protecting spirit. Okay, a lot of names, a lot of stories, but we'll remind everybody if needed. Okay, now we're going to share the book, and we'll start on chapter 32, which is called Recapitulation. Okay, Zoraida, are you going to read for us?
Yes, of course. Recapitulation. When he got back to the hospital, Mario Silva did not meet with his boss because he had left on urgent business. However, he received instructions from a nurse. He read them closely. There was a child who had a bad case of croup and needed assistance right away. In possession of the address and armed with everything he could need for treating the boy, Silva took a bus to Amaro's house. Welcomed courteously by Amaro, he could not hide the perplexity that suddenly assailed him. He nervously stuttered a few model syllables in response to the greeting. His surprise showed in the extreme paleness of his face. So, he thought in distress, this was the place? If he had known, he would have asked for some else to go instead. He hadn't planned on meeting these enemies again. He loathed the man that had stolen his bride, and he couldn't look at Zulmira without feeling inexplicable aversion. A lot of times when he recalled the past, he tried to figure out what would be the best way to get rid of her. Why did he have to meet her again? Why should he save her child while he felt like setting fire to the place? But something was interfering with his thoughts. Antonina and her kids at the home gospel study appeared on his mental screen. He seemed to hear the gentle, sincere words of the valorous woman once again saying to his soul, "The hands that heal cannot wound." An industrious healthcare giver is obviously a brother to all. Life does not end with this world. We need to forgive others so that they will forgive us. Noticing his hesitation and wanting to put him at ease, Mario invited him. "Come in, Mario. I'm glad to see that a friend is going to help us." Indicating the next room, he added, "Zulmira is in there with our son. The doctor called and said that the test of the croup was positive." Emotionless, the health caregiver obeyed mechanically. He went into the bedroom, troubled and pale. When he saw the woman whom he had loved with all his heart, holding the boy on her lap, he felt a certain vertigo of repulsion. Incapable of controlling himself, he felt a strange affliction weighing on his chest. The desire of vengeance was blinding him. Zulmira would pay dearly for having deserted him, he thought, with eyes set on the dolorous motherhood that was being expressed in mortifying suffering. He contemplated the child afflicted with this media, and gave free rein to uncontained animosity. He felt that he had hated him for a long, long time. He was surprised, startled by this. How could he detest an innocent child with such vehemence? But thinking he could justify his awful frame of mind under such circumstances, the result of a connection he found unbearable, he did not try to analyze himself. The idea that Amaro and his wife would suffer irreparable from the death of the boy nourished his cruel plan for revenge. The happiness of that domestic temple depended on what he would do at that very moment. What if he were to cooperate with death by helping this sick child die? This criminal question passed through his mind like a dagger of darkness. However, he remembered the prayer service at Antonina's. Her consoling statements came to mind. Peaceful accord is worth more. We mustn't feed any kind of spite. Whoever judges is judged in turn. No one can rise to the highest levels of life while spiritually hardened. We never really know whether we are the ones who are offended or if we are the ones who are doing the offending. Forgiveness is the victory of the light. The details of the edifying discussion were like intangible reins that halted the expansion of his wrongful desires. Conflicted sentiments unfold in his conscience for a brief minute. Almost staggering, he approached his tormented ex-wife, who recognized him immediately and tried to greet him. He responded ceremoniously and got to work. Mario implored the poor woman in agony, "Take pity on us. Please help us. I had to bear the hardest sacrifices as I waited for my son. Would it be right for me to see him die now?" She was so choked up with tears that she could not speak anymore. In the past, any request coming from the mouth would have stirred him to action, but now a cold indifference filled his soul. Why should he care about the pain of the woman that had left him? Sumila had laughed at him years before. Wasn't it his turn to laugh now? With an unkind look, he recommended the boy be put back to bed. Then he checked the child's sensitivity. With his mind hampered by the ideas gleaned during that evening's gospel study, and with the sweet memory of Antonina, he tried for a new attitude. Even so, as if he had infernal genie in his mind, he picked up on the criminal suggestions that came into his head. Giving the wrong medication to the child will, of course, cause a speedy death. Leo was already at death's door. He only needed a little shove, and there he would go. However, Antonina's face dominated his memory, exalting forgiveness. If he had come here a day earlier, he thought to himself, he would have exterminated the child without mercy. He would have used euthanasia as an excuse to ease his mind. But now, like intrusive thoughts, the evangelical principles of fraternity and reconciliation tormented his conscience.
Thanks. So, sorry, a very long passage here, but I think it was important to get all together. So Mario, the nurse that we met before, again, last chapter, that he spent the time with Antonina and her children doing the gospel at home, forgiveness. And before we met him in a sleep state, right? When he met Amaru and very angry, tried to attack Amaru, and Amaru trying to defend himself. Amaru was already at a more evolved stage on his spiritual journey than Mario. Mario was still harboring a lot of inferior sentiments and inferior thoughts. So when he finds himself at the house of his most hated enemies, he tries to control himself in the sense that he keeps quiet, he keeps to himself, he doesn't engage much with Amaru and Zulmira, but he cannot hide from himself the hatred and the desire of vengeance that he have been carrying for a very long time, since Zulmira left him to marry Amaru. But again, the importance of everything that went through the day before, that he learned, very surprised at Antonina's house, and the words of Antonina guided by Clarencio, that if you remember last month, it was so important, when she said to him that a person like him could not have enemies, that because the hands that heal cannot wound, And then she talks about forgiveness and that life continues. Antonina, if you remember, had a young boy that discarnated, went back to the spiritual world, was there in the same child colony that Julio found himself between the incarnations. And we are introduced very quickly to Antonina's fourth child that died, and how she experienced his life in the spiritual world and the emotions and everything, and the importance of her not remembering what she went through with her discarnated son, because it made it very difficult for her to continue living her life. But coming back to Mario, Amaro invites him. Amaro, of course, has no ill feelings towards Mario, and we saw that in the dreams. He seems pleasantly surprised that Mario is there to help them. Talks about him going to help Zumira, and Mario, when he enters the room, when he sees Zumira, he's feeling this repulsion, this hatred, and the desire of vengeance comes back to his mind. And then he sees the child again. Julio was someone that stole Lina from him in the past, right? So he hates Julio from the past also, and he sees the child and feels that he had hated him for a long, long time, and becomes surprised because how can he hate an innocent child, a one-year-old child, with such vehemence, right? And only reincarnation and can explain these feelings that we have for someone that we never met before in this present life, or we have no reason to feel hatred, or the other way, also the other way, to feel sympathy, and we do. So that these are the connections. But again, when he thinks about helping the sick child die, he immediately remembers the prayer services. You see the important things that stay on our mind. There is no, it's when we talk here about the spiritual influences, right? We can think, oh, there is Clarencio or Odila talking to him. No, it's him himself remembering what happened the night before and what Antonina told him, that we mustn't feel any kind of spite. Whoever judges is judged in turn. Peaceful accord is worth more. So, and talking about spiritually evolving, forgiveness is the victory of the life. So all this comes to his mind that prevents him to act in his inferior tendencies. He cannot still control his hatred. Zumira asks him to help him, to take pity on him, and he acts mechanically, not trying to intentionally cause any harm, but not really trying to help. He's kind of doing his job there, not much more than that. He asks that for the child to be put back into bed, and he thinks again about giving him the wrong medication, that he sees that the child is already close to dying. But Antonina's face continues dominating his memory, asking, exalting forgiveness. And he clearly thinks that, if he had come one day earlier, he would have done what he's thinking of doing, the euthanasia, without even thinking about it. But now, like intrusive thoughts, again, his own thoughts, evangelical principles of fraternity and reconciliation, tormented his conscience. I like the word tormented here, because when you think about fraternity and reconciliation, you shouldn't think about torment, right? But again, his conscience is dominated by desires of vengeance, with the the opposite feelings of fraternity and reconciliation that he had just learned the day before, but more important, more than learn, started to make an impression on him. He started changing with the thoughts and the learning that he had the day before, because many times we talk about learning, but more important than learning is to put in practice, to internalize. And we can see him here that he begins to internalize the concepts that he learned the day before, still with a big struggle with the hatred that he feels towards the whole family there, Amaro, Zumira, and little Julio. Okay, Elmo, anything to comment here?
No, I think in terms of the story itself, the novel, so to say, it's easy to understand. What I'm thinking here is, again, it's my thinking is how naturally goodness overpowers bad, right? How one day that he meets this woman and is exposed to these lessons of forgiveness, kind of overpowers his ill sentiments towards that family. Naturally, we can, as intelligent being, reasonable being, reason, and reason can undo that natural overpowering of goodness over evil. But if you allow it happens, it almost seems like the divine nature, the divine plan has the system that it allows the goodness to overpower the evil. Otherwise, he will definitely commit euthanasia right there. But one day, one little lesson, which is a big lesson naturally, in forgiveness makes him redirect his energy towards goodness. I think that's a natural process built in our essence as having God within us.
Yesterday's lecture by Yuri on the United States Spiritist Federation, he starts with darkness, right? And he talks about there is no darkness, there is only the absence of light. There is no hatred, there is only the absence of love. So all the negative things are just the absence of the good, right? So no place can stay dark. When you light a candle, it's already enough to remove darkness, right? And you see exactly here, right? A little bit, a small candle was lightened in his mind, right? And it was enough to remove some darkness of his mind, not all of it, but made the change, right? So it was a very good lecture yesterday. You guys should watch if you missed. Any questions here, comments? Yes, Ebony.
Yes, I think just following up on what Elmo said, I think this also shows us how important it is for us to study the gospel at home. We just never know whose heart we will be encouraged to turn towards the good. We never know who might be knocking at a door, perhaps coming for, some other reason. And as you study the gospel, they may be interested in or touched by what is being said. And that is exactly what they needed at that particular time in their life.
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. And again, we tend to think that we cannot change, we cannot make changes. How can we change anything, right? We're too small. But if we change one person, we already changed a lot, right? Yes, Ebony.
Yeah, and we were just commented last Monday in our reading in the definition of labor in accordance to Spiritism being any useful activity. And doing the gospel at home is a huge labor because Jabe is defined as any useful activity again. But also thinking here, one little message that you may read from the many books of messages of Emmanuel, or not even a spiritist, of any good message that you read and take the time to understand, and if you can share that message with someone else, may be a huge labor, a huge usefulness to someone else that you have no idea, because you don't know what people has in their heart. You have a nurse that would imagine to be a heart full of goodness that can only do good to people and carry that kind of ill sentiments towards someone. And one little message may be exactly what will prevent or avoid that individual to commit some serious problems that may linger more than one incarnation. And if you can pass that little message to someone, we have no idea how much goodness that can do to someone. And it's not up to us to know or to try to figure this out. We do the good that we can for the sake of doing good, knowing that it can only be good. Harm is not going to do to anyone in any situation.
Yeah, and when you think about forgiveness also, right? Which when we talk about forgiveness, according to what we learn in Spiritism, that forgiveness is for ourselves, right? We are the ones that get the full benefit of forgiving someone else. You see in this case here, the Mario has all the hatred towards Amaro and Zulmira. They have no hatred towards him. They have nothing, no ill sentiments towards him. So if he is able to forgive them, it's not going to make any difference for Zulmira or Amaro. It's going to make a difference for him only, right? He's going to be better, spiritually speaking, if he forgives. And that's a good example why forgiveness is important for the person who forgives. Not important. It's not important for the one being forgiven, because the person being forgiven sometimes is not interested in being forgiven, or was not offended at all to begin with, right? In this case, Zulmira left him, probably, thought about, it was a better choice for her, and she didn't harbor any hatred towards Mario. It's just she made her choices, which I think it's also very important for us to learn here. Okay. All right. Well, let's continue here.
Okay. He waited in silence for the boy's wheezy reaction, and although he signaled serious complications that would certainly induce him to communicate with the physician in charge, he applied an anti-diphtherian serum. He secretly hoped, however, that it would turn out to be a deadly poison. We could see that Mario's hands were emitting a dark substance, but Clarenzo put his own hand on the boy to insulate him from it. Considering the dread with which we observed the exteriorization of that darkly substance, our instructor explained, "Those are deleterious fluids of hatred with which Sylvia unknowingly wants to envelope the poor child. However, our defenses are holding." Odelia, who had called for Blandina and Mariana, anxiously watched the treatment. "My selfless friend," she said to our instructor, "do you think Julio will get better?" After he established a broad magnetic band around the child to protect him from the visitor's influence, Clarenzo shook his head and replied, "Odelia, it is time for you to come to grips with the truth. The boy will leave his body behind in perhaps just a few hours. His future requires failure in the present. But take heart, the divine will, expressed in the law that governs us, always does what is best. And perhaps because our heartbroken sister was about to make another plea, our devoted leader calmly stated, "Don't ask questions for now. You'll understand later. Julio's in need of assistance. Watch, care, and love." Odelia recomposed the expression on her face in a display of humility and discipline. Mario gazing at the child as if he were hypnotizing him to death, observing his facial contractions. The parents were also gazing at him in dire expectation. Just then, Julio began shaking and went pale. His heart was out of control. Now terrified, Sylvia took his pulse, looked into Amario's afflicted eyes, and told him in a gentler voice, "The doctor needs to come right away. I fear an apoplectic shock of fatal consequences." Zumila let out a hoarse scream and was held by the loving Evelina as Amario headed for the door to get the pediatrician. A slow and dreadful hour went by in the cramped room. The physician worriedly examined the child and then told the disconsolate father in private, "Unfortunately, he is about to die, and there's nothing we can do. If you are religious, let's entrust the matter to God. Now, only divine intervention." Mario lowered his head in dismay and said nothing. The pediatrician exchanged ideas with Silva, who had gone pale, and gave him instructions. As he left, he told him to stay at the boy's side for a few more hours. Zumilia had been given a sedative which compelled her to rest. Julio was now in a coma and was breathing with difficulty. Meanwhile, the night was moving forward. Dawn, washed by the light breeze, allowed a view of the sky filled with twinkling constellations. Seeing that his wife and daughter were sleeping, Mario went over to the window, as if seeking consolation in the welcoming bosom of the night, and began to weep in silence. Beside the dying child, Mario observed his suffering and humble attitude and realized that his own soul was touched to the core. Why had he fought against such an enemy? He wondered. Mario was like a statue of silent suffering. There he was, head down and defeated in his mother's home, where he was a man of good and devoted to righteousness. Obviously, he had already suffered a lot. His face, furrowed with premature wrinkles that held his tears, spoke of the cross of harsh experiences that weighed on his shoulders. How many troubling problems had that man bent over because of the harshness of faith confronted? How could he, Mario Silva, have been so cold-hearted? He recalled a passage from the hour of study and prayer, and finally understood that the gospel was founded on the best line of reasoning. It was better to reconcile oneself immediately with one's adversary than to hold a thorn of remorse in one's heart. And he sadly noted that, like a knife, remorse was shredding his. No doubt, Amaro and his wife should have manifested distrust upon seeing him again and should have refused his help. However, they had welcomed him fraternally with open arms. If they had wounded him in the past, weren't they now under the iron glove of terrible flagellation? He thanked the God that he had not injected the now dying child with poison, but still, hadn't he contributed to hasten his death? He felt like approaching the heartbroken father to try to comfort him, but he was ashamed of himself.
Okay, thanks, Zoraida. So the interesting thing here is that when Mario was trying to take care of the child, Andre Luiz describes that they could see Mario's hands emitting a dark substance and Clarencio protecting the boy from it, right? Is the action of the spiritual benefactors. Again, we can expand on the thinking here, right? If someone sends us hateful thoughts, we would receive them if we are vibrating at the same level, right? If we are not, if we are vibrating at a more elevated level, all this dark substance that it may be sent towards us. It's not going to reach us, right? So that's the importance of again going to the prayer, to the gospel at home, to keeping positive thoughts, to keeping a positive view on the future, to protect ourselves from this energy, lower energies that are around us all the time, right? People in our workplaces, in our families, but we can defend ourselves with the help of the spiritual benefactors. Julio was not supposed to receive these dark energies. He was supposed to be protected from it. He was already going through the struggles of the process of discarnation, and he didn't need or it was not necessary for him to receive these dark energies. So, of course, Andre Luiz and Hilario are seeing it, dreading what they see, and the Clarencio explains that these are fluids of hatred that Silva unknowingly wants to envelop the poor child, right? So he has this hatred in his heart, and it's difficult for him to control, even when he has these different thoughts. Whenever he's thinking about poisoning the boy, his thought is matter. He's creating these dark energies and sending towards the boy. So Odila comes with Blandina and Mariana. If you don't remember, or if you haven't read, Odila is the first wife of Amaro, the mother of Evelina, and first in the beginning was the obsessor of Zulmira that was educated by Clarencio and changed. Was rescued by Sister Clara, if you remember some chapters ago. Blandina and Mariana are the ones responsible for taking care of the children where Julio was. He was living with Blandina. Mariana is Blandina's grandmother, and they were taking care of him. So they all come together. Of course, Odila is very involved in Julio's reincarnation. She understood the necessity of him reincarnating. Is her own child, right? When she was alive, she had a baby called Julio, died drowning, and she became obsessed in Zulmira, blaming her for the death of Julio. So she comes, and Clarencio immediately tells her, it's time for you to know the truth. The boy will discarnate, will leave his body in a few hours, because for a better future, it requires for this failure in the present. But Clarencio says the divine will is expressed in the law that governs us, who always does what is best. And tells her that she will understand later, and then she accepts and shows humility and discipline. Then Julio starts to struggle, began shaking, went pale. Mario finally decides that it's time to call the doctor, asks for Amaro to call the doctor. He's fearing an anaphylactic shock. I'll ask Elmo a little bit of the explanation of the medical conditions just very quickly later. Then Zulmira, of course, gets very desperate. Amaro leaves to go for the pediatrician. Evelina is present there also helping. And the physician comes and tells them that the child's about to die. If you're religious, pray, only divine intervention. And then he gives some instructions to Mario, who was gone pale, gives a sedative to Zulmira. Julio is in a coma, breathing very difficultly, and Mario starts to reflect and and starts to analyze the whole situation and starts to second guess his hatred, his anger, and how could he have been so cold-hearted. He starts remembering the study and prayer, and he sees a struggling family and starts to reflect on, cause and consequence, and the family that are going through such difficult times maybe is a consequence of what they did. He doesn't really understand that much, but what he can feel is this remorse that he starts feeling, and he starts feeling guilty by all the ill sentiments he had towards Julio. He thanks God for not having killed the child, but starts thinking, hasn't he contributed to the death of the child? And he felt like approaching Amaro, but was too embarrassed to do it. So a lot of drama here. Elmo, anything to add? A little bit of the what Julio is going through physically, just a quick explanation for those that are maybe curious.
Okay, so croup is a bacterial infection disease that causes inflammation of the upper airway. So the tonsils, the larynx, the trachea all get very inflamed, which causes severe short of breath, dyspnea, as we read before. There is vaccination, but the way to avoid it naturally is vaccine. Every child in this country is vaccinated against it. It has killed so many people. When it get to that stage, these days, if it happens, is the child will be intubated to keep the airway open, and has to be treated with aggressive antibiotics, natural intravenous antibiotics. When you get to that point, it's of severity is a very deadly disease. So again, the best way is to treat. The vaccination is to prevent. The vaccination is the thing that is almost very few cases in this country, almost none in this country. At one point, it was basically eradicated, but now with these idiots with anti-vaccine movement, some case has shown up again, which is a big alert for us to be very careful with these conspiracy theories out there. Anaphylaxis is a very severe allergic reaction, is an immune response to something. And anaphylaxis is extremely deadly as well, because it's also causes shutdown of the airways, the constriction of the airways, and also very deadly. So I don't know what is the cause of death of this child now, if the medication that received caused anaphylaxis, or if the group would take care of him of the cause of death itself. But yeah, at one point, at that time in Brazil, I would imagine the group, I don't know, but I would imagine that in Brazil, there would be a very high rate of mortality for this serious bacterial infection. And for the lessons it states here is I think, as Ron said, is very important, that when Jesus said that we've seen through thought, that's exactly what is being explained here to us, right? That thought is a very powerful thing. He may probably clinically, as a clinician, he did everything right. But as a eternal spirit, with his heart that you so corrupted by the desire for revenge, it still emitted very dense negative energies to an individual who was so fragile at that moment that didn't take much to turn him over, right? So when Jesus tells us to be vigilant, I think in those situations that we really have to be vigilant, and the thoughts come, yes. We have no idea why we have some aversion towards someone or towards some situation, but with the gospel of Christ by our side in our mind and being vigilant, we should try to do our best to replace those sentiments with a quick prayer or something to not sin by thought, as this nurse just did here. And again, define sin here as missing the target. Okay. As a clinician, the target is to heal people.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Let's go on.
Okay. The two stayed where they were, mute and impassive, but almost for 2 hours. The dawn was beginning to reflect itself in the sky in broad red streaks when the railroad worker abandoned his thoughts and approached his almost dead son. With a moving gesture of faith, he took an old wooden crucifix off the wall and put it on the nightstand beside the dying child. Then he sat down on the bed and took the boy on his lap with special tenderness. Assisted spiritually by Odelia, who was embracing him, he gazed at the image of Christ's crucifix and prayed out loud, "Divine Jesus, have mercy on our weakness. My spirit is too fragile to deal with death. Give us strength and understanding. Our children are yours, but how it pains us to have to give them back when your will demands their return." Tears interrupted his voice, but displaying his urgent need to pray, he continued, "If it is your will for our son to leave us, O Lord, receive him into your arms of love and light, but grant us the courage we need to bravely bear our cross of longing and pain. Give us resignation, faith, and hope. Help us understand your purposes, and may your will be done now and forever." Streams of seraphine light flowed from his chest to envelope the child, who little by little fell into the deep sleep. Julio disengaged himself from his physical body, finding shelter in Odelia's arms like an orphan seeking the warm nest of caresses. Touching the innermost fibers of his being and realizing that death had extended his large wings there, Silva felt a violent commotion constraining his soul. Convulsive weeping shook his chest, while an unspoken voice, which seemed to arise from the recesses of his being, shouted in his conscience, "Murderer, murderer." Disoriented and unhinged, he ran out into the street, weeping in torment in the cold darkness.
Okay. So here we have the process of discarnation of Julio. What we see here is Amaro deciding to embrace with his son in his lap and do a prayer, ask for help, but also accepting the will of God, asking for strength and understanding, asking for resignation, faith, and hope. And again, it's a very important lesson because, again, prayer is to ask for something, to praise, or to thank. And most of our prayers is to ask. Amaro here is asking, but also is accepting what is come to them, is asking for the strength to have resignation, to have faith, and to have hope. And Andre Luiz describes the streams of sapphire light flowing from his chest, enveloping the child, meaning he's helping, unaware of, but he's helping the transition, the discarnation of Julio. Again, let us remind everyone again, the process of death of the physical body and the discarnation of the spirit are two different things. The death of the physical body is when the physical body no longer can work. The discarnation of the spirit is the separation from the spirit, the separation of the spirit from the physical body that is leaving behind. In the case of a child, like 1 year old that has no understanding and knowledge of what's going on, the spiritual benefactors will take care of the separation, but the spirit is being helped by the prayer of the father, even if the prayer is somehow trying to keep the child alive. Of course, that's what he wants. We cannot blame him for wanting his son to stay alive, to survive, to overcome. That's the natural prayer that he's going to make, and that's understandable. But it is a positive, uplifting prayer, because then you see the light flow. So it works in the sense of helping his child, not how he wanted, but how the child needed to receive. So Julio disengaged himself from the physical body and immediately is sheltered by Odila, that is taking personal care of him and is following all the process and is going to help him return to the spiritual colony that he left when he was reincarnating. But then we talk about what happens to Mario, right? When he sees the child dying, he starts to think immediately that he was somewhat responsible for the murder of the child, which was not really the case. The child was not murdered, but he's thinking that he murdered the child and he's blaming himself. Murder, right? This voice shouting in his conscience. You can ask, isn't this some spirit trying to accuse him? It may be, but more likely that is his own conscience, because he's starting to reflect on everything that is going on and his conflicting emotions that he's feeling of hatred towards the couple and the child, and then the need for forgive, the need to help, that he wasn't able to fully help like he would do if was a child that he had, or a family he had no relationship with. So what he does, he runs out in the street weeping, because of course he didn't want to show his emotions to those inside. He left the house and he's very, very disturbed. We'll get back to him later, but that's how we find him. So I think it's a very interesting passage that talks about the process of discarnation and the help and assistance that the father provided without really knowing and understanding what he was doing, but with his love, above all, towards his son, he helped the process, even if it's the process he didn't want to happen. Helmo.
No, I have nothing to add.
Any questions, comments here? Okay, so next chapter, a learning experience. I don't think we are going to have time to finish the chapter, but we'll start it because it's too early. It's a very long chapter, and that talks about first them going back to taking back Julio to the spiritual colony, and then talks a lot. The second part talks a lot about guardian angel and protecting spirits. We'll probably leave that for next month, but let's start.
Okay. A learning experience. Amaro and his family, assisted by some neighbors, were putting a sheet over the boy's stiff body as we made our way back to La de Bencao. Held in Ardelia's arms, Julio seemed more relieved and peaceful than he ever had been. As our sisters exchanged thoughts about the future, I asked of our instructor about the serenity that now gladdened the boy. Julio was readjusted himself so that he can continue his evolutionary struggle, replied Clarenzo. His short rebirth did not only entail exploratory significance necessary for the spirit that abandons the learning experience, but it was also a healing remedy for him. The stay in the physical realm acted as a resource that eliminated the wound and the delicate tissues of his soul. In many cases, the flesh functions like a fiber that retains the impurity of the spirit, freeing it from certain ills. That means that from now on, Julio will be able to manifest himself outwardly in a healthy body, having acquired the merit to receive a duly planned reincarnation, entailing elevated objectives of service. After a few months with us, he will have developed sufficiently to return to the earth in the praiseworthy condition of self-harmony. He'll go back in such a short time? I asked, amazed. We hope so. He needs to concentrate on perfecting the nobler qualities for life eternal, and only the return to the school of the flesh can help him do that. Moreover, he needs to live with Amaro, Zumila, and Silva in a fraternal manner in keeping with the pure love that Christ taught us. This information, I replied, sheds new light on our study of life. We can see that complex, lengthy diseases have a specific function: birth defects, Down syndrome, and paralysis. That's right. Sometimes the soul's incursion into the realms of disequilibrium is so great that it must undergo a long journey to return to normality. And smiling, he added, time of restorative hell corresponds to the time of the premeditated wrong. During many phases of our evolution, we are drawn to the webs of the flesh, which always reflects our intrinsic individuality, just as the clay is placed in the heat of the kiln, or just as impure metal is cast into the red-hot furnace. Purification requires effort, sacrifice, patience. Before our wondrous eyes, the horizon was painted with variegated colors, announcing the sun that seemed to be born from a sea of light and gold. Far away, the stars were growing dim, while nearby light clouds hurried along, driven by the breeze. Clarenzo contemplated the sky and considered, when our spirit learns a little bit about the glory of the universe, it awakens the most sublime hopes. It dreams about entering the divine spheres and longs to meet again sanctified loves waiting for it in distant vanguards. Thus, it will willingly accept the hard work of readjustment. What are a few decades of selflessness on the earth when compared with the magnificence of centuries of bliss on worlds of wisdom and ennobling endeavor? Ah, if people only knew, I exclaimed, remembering the rebelliousness that so often harms us in the world. They will someday objected Clarenzo optimistically. All beings progress and evolve toward God. Earth humans will grow into this great understanding and will happily praise the assistance of pain. Over the years, the accord becomes a hoary oak, rich in beauty and usefulness. And over the millennium, the spirit becomes a supreme genius, crowned with love and wisdom. After a minute of silent adoration of nature, the instructor continued. Getting back to Julio's case, we mustn't forget that between birth and death, thousands of intelligences are working on their own recovery. To the degree that we clarify our consciences and strengthen our notion of responsibility, we start to realize that our spiritual worthiness entails an untransferable service. We owe to ourselves everything that happens to us in terms of good or evil. It's interesting to observe, said Hilario thoughtfully, how life for the reestablishment of peace requires a coming together of those who have been at war with each other. In the past, Julio slid down the slippery slope of suicide where the influence of Amaro and Zumila after having quarreled with Sylvia. And now, completed Clarenzo, with the help of Zumila and Amaro, he has rehabilitated himself so that he can reharmonize himself with Mario. It was only natural.
Thanks. So here we leave Amaro and his family behind. They are taking care of the burial of the boy. body, and Julio spirit going back to the children's colony in Odila's arms, and he now looks relieved and peaceful. Remember, he was there in the spiritual world when he first met him, struggling, being under treatment from Blandina, but struggling with the throat pains. And when Odila finally meets him after she stops obsessing Zulmira, she finds him in very difficult situation, and the time she spends there with him convinces her of the necessity of reincarnation. So the reincarnation happens, and he finishes the readjustment for his past deeds, right? This both suicide attempts, the unsuccessful and the successful one. So Clarencio explains that he has readjusted himself so he can continue his evolutionary struggle. So he had cleaned his spirit, and he explains the flesh functions like a filter that retains the impurities of the perispirit, freeing it from certain ills. So what happens here is that the disease that he had in the throat, that was manifesting in the perispirit also, when he reincarnated and transferred it to the physical body, with the death of the physical body, the perispirit is healed of that specific problem. Again, we are always evolving, so our perispirit carries many ills, but that we accumulated over our lives. But in this specific case, this specific illness, he was able to eliminate in the delicate tissues of his soul, as Clarencio explains here, when he spent some time, a very short time in the physical world. So now he'll be able to manifest himself in a healthy body in his next incarnation. That is coming in a very short time, and Andre Luiz is amazed about that. And Clarencio explains he needs to concentrate on perfecting the nobler qualities for life eternal, and only by returning to the flesh he can do that. And also he needs to readjust. He still needs to live with Amaro, Zulmira, and readjust with Silva in a fraternal manner. And then Andre Luiz goes a little bit about the diseases that, the birth defects, Down syndrome, paralysis, and Clarencio explains that sometimes the soul's incursion in the realms of disequilibrium is so great that it takes a long journey to return to normality. Long journey meaning maybe more than one incarnation besides the time we spend in the spiritual world. Depends on how we unbalanced ourselves. It may take a very long journey to come back to normality. Again, we are studying very specific cases. Each case is our own case is a different one. Nobody has the same journey as others. But in general, when he says here, the time of restorative hell corresponds to the time of premeditated wrong, it's not an eye for an eye, but it's when he says that what he's trying to say here is that the more we insist on choosing the wrong path and making wrong choices, the more time will take for us to go back to the right path. We need to purify ourselves, and that requires effort, sacrifice, patience. And what's missing here also is time. So we need to be willing to readjust ourselves. We need to be willing to make an effort. We need to have all these aspects. We need to make an effort with patience and with sacrifice. And then a little bit of poetic description of what's going on out there. And Clarencio continues talking about our eternal journey as spirits, that the spirits need to learn. And he talks about, what's the few decades, one incarnation of selflessness on earth when we compare it to eternity. And Andre Luiz says, even imagine if people knew of that, right? And Clarencio says, we are always progressing. So all beings progress and evolve towards God. So humans will grow into this great understanding over millennia. Again, it's not quick thing, but over the millennia, the spirit becomes a supreme genius crowned with love and wisdom. But going back to Julio's case, he talks about the need to clarify our conscience and strengthen our notion of responsibility, and that we are responsible for everything that happens to us in terms of good and evil. And again, we talked a little bit about this on Thursday, cause and consequence. We tend to think about bad causes, bad consequence, but we forget about good actions, good causes that cause good consequences, rewarding benefits that we gather from choosing the right path. But Hilario talks about the necessity of readjusting and getting together with the ones that we had trouble in our past. In this case, Julio coming back to be a son of Amaro and Zulmira. Amaro actually decides to help them while he wasn't still in the spiritual world, and the readjustment also with Silva. And Clarencio says it's a natural process. He needs to reharmonize himself with Mario, and he will do it with the help of Zulmira and Amaro. Okay. Our spiritual journey as eternal spirits and cause and consequence. Okay. Helmo, anything here?
Yeah. I think this is show of the purification of the physical body is something very interesting, something that I have to be very careful with, not to make assumptions, right? When you see someone with some kind of disease, please do not start to imagine this or that about the spirit or the spirit's past lives. It's extremely dangerous. You have no idea, and we cannot be judging in any situation. Time is essential, right? I know some people that does not believe in time. I'm a firm believer in time. I do believe that time is indeed the greatest God's ally. And I was thinking in making an analogy here and to understand this relationship of the spirit and the physical body. When we say that all the illnesses of the physical body, the genesis, the very beginning, the very reason of it is spiritual, comes from the spirit. It becomes hard for us to understand, right? If I get a bacterial infection, what does it have to do with my spirit? No. If there is an epidemic of a virus out there like COVID, everybody's got it. What does it have to do with the spirit? And I think this explanation of Clarencio shed a lot of light on this. And the analogy that I was thinking here is if you think of industrial complex that out of irresponsibility is dumping pollutant into a river, right? It's instead of being responsible with its how it manages waste, is just dumping waste that ends up into a river, and it's killing the river, right? It's killing the life of that river. For whatever reason, the CEOs of that company or that complex itself understand the harm they are doing and make the necessary corrections. They completely stop dumping pollutant into that river. At the moment that they stop that, the river is still polluted and will remain polluted for quite some time. It's not going to clear immediately just because the genesis, the cause of the problem, have rectified itself, have made the necessary corrections. The pipes that connects that intrusive complex to the river is contaminated. It's going to take time to clear it out. And it's going to take time for that river to begin getting healthy again. So the analogy here is that intrusive complex is we, the eternal spirit. The pipes that connect to the river is our perispirit. And the river itself is our physical body. So very often when you see individuals going through some kind of illnesses, that we may think that that spirit is a spirit that deserves this and that. In reality, that's a spirit that in process of recovery, that had already understood, have already made the necessary corrections in itself, but there is already imprinted some pollutant in that perispirit, in that physical body, that will take time to clear it. And that physical body is extremely important for the perispirit because it functions exactly as a buffer, as a filter that filters out all those pollutants, purify that perispirit, and when the physical body dies, in consequence of those diseases or anything else, discarnation takes place, that spirit goes back to the spiritual world, now healthy, because it was made of the necessary corrections. And the death of the physical body, or the physical body in this case, acted as the more important healing instrument for that perispirit. So when you see someone suffering now, maybe the reason for the suffering is something way in the past that has already been corrected, but requires time for the purification of that perispirit. And the physical body will be the major instrument to help to purify that perispirit. But again, everything starts, the genesis is there with the spirit. The genesis is there with the CEOs of the company that stop definitely to send pollutant to the river.
Ebony.
I think a good attitude for us to have when we see people suffering, just to summarize what Elmo just said, for me, I just think of it as somebody who is making an investment in their future. And we just simply need to support them.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
But then again, we don't know, right? We hope that that's the case, but we don't know. Just because I am suffering from consequences of my act in the past, I may actually, with my attitude, with my rebelliousness, be aggravating the problem. We don't know. But we take that attitude that you suggest, and I think it's the best one, is see those individuals, someone in the process of recovery. Yes, eventually it's going to happen because the laws of progress. But perhaps with our thoughts like that, we will help that person to redirect its energies and use that suffering as the instrument of help, of purification that is supposed to mean. But again, as an eternal spirit, as owner of my free will, I may waste that suffering and even complicate things even more. And again, I'm going to use the example that I have used in the past. And I think it's a good one when I was a clinician in general surgery in a hospital where we did a lot of amputations. And this very same day, I will never forget that, I admitted 2 patients. One was a woman who was in the garden like 2 weeks past, and because of a severe diabetic neuropathy, she got a piece of chicken bone stuck in her feet and she never knew it. By the time that she noticed that it was possible that the infection had already spread, she would need to amputate that leg. And the other one was a man with severe diabetes as well, who was not taking proper care of wound infection that require weekly going to a clinic for proper care and just neglect going. And when come back to us, needs an amputation as well. Both admitted the same way, both had the same disease, both need the same treatment. I would go to change the dressings on both of them every morning. I go to the woman's room and the only thing she would ask me every single time, why are you not smiling? That is beautiful. I'm so grateful all of you have figured this out and was able to save my life. Go ahead, do what you have to do with that kind of attitude. I go to the second room with the individual to do the same thing, and he'll do ask, why do you have to come in now? Don't you see that I'm watching TV? And just imagine what he was watching. I didn't get my pain medication yet. You got the lady get me the pain medication. You guys did it to me. You guys did not take care of me proper. That's why I end up with missing a piece of my leg. Can you just come back later? Same disease, same cause of amputation, same thing treatment that I have to do to both of them. We see one making use, take advantage of that suffering to purify him or herself, and the other one, in my opinion, just create more problems for himself. So I think it's important to understand that suffering is a wonderful tool that's there for us to use, but having free will may misuse as well.
Yeah. And again, I think you gave the example, but that was exactly what I was going to say, right? When you see someone facing a difficulty with a positive attitude, with a upbeat view, you can see someone that is going very likely to try an experience to learn something. And those that revolt, in most cases, is an atonement, right? It's still struggling to understand and accept. But again, in most cases, not every case is the same, and it's important for us to I think what Ebony said, the attitude towards any case, it should be of a prayer, of acceptance, and of understanding whatever they are doing with their own struggles is for them to deal with, right? We should be helping, not causing more problems. And I was thinking about the mediumship meetings, right? When we have spirits that come with all the suffering still of the physical body that was left behind, and sometimes they don't know that they left the physical body behind. Sometimes they know, but they're still struggling with the pain, with whatever happened to the physical body, and we try to provide the assistance, the treatment, and many of them get rid of these feelings very quickly, but some of them cannot, right? Which is those that carry the issues that they created for themselves in the physical life back to the spiritual life. So the wound is not going to be healed, and it's not going to disappear. It's going to carry for the next incarnation, very likely. Right? I think I'm going to stop here because it's again, this chapter is very long. We have a lot to go over, and I don't want to rush into this part that we are going to. We still have to talk about Julio coming back, where he was in the spiritual world, and then we are going to talk about guardian angels and protecting spirits, which is very, very important, right? Because there is a very common question: what are guardian angels, or protecting spirits, familiar spirits? And there is a very extensive explanation that Clarencio gives on the difference between the guardian angel, how the guardian angel works, and the familiar spirits that we all have, meaning the spirits that are dear to us, not, they are able to be there to help us, to be close to us, but they are not much more evolved than we are. That's why they are there and trying to help us, but sometimes making mistakes and making wrong choices. It's a very interesting study, and it deserves more time for us to do it. So we're going to leave it for next month. Okay? Any final comments, questions here? Okay, so next Sunday will be the Gospel According to Spiritism. This is the second Sunday of the month. We still are in the prayers, right? The final chapter. And we still probably have a couple months to go on the prayers, right, Helm?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Sure. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Elmo. And thank you, Sarita, for reading, and everyone who is participating today. Infinite Creator and Divine Providence, we give thanks for the opportunity to be together again as brothers and sisters for our study of the book Between Heaven and Earth. We're reviewing chapters 32 and 33 regarding recapitulation and a learning experience. Imbalances are essentially spiritual. Forgiveness is the victory of light. Conflicted sentiments and dense negative thoughts are detrimental and cause disequilibrium in various incarnations. Discarnation is a separation of the spirit from the physical body. Loving prayers can assist the benefactors during this transition. The divine law always does what is best and governs this process. Purification requires effort, sacrifice, patience, and responsibility, which does take a bit of time in this readjustment journey. We are always evolving over many centuries. This is the law of progress. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, and for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, the counselors, the mediums, the workers, and all of the participants. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace, and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all spiritual centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. May we go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail. So be it.